All right, welcome everybody to the third and final session of the Universal Perspective Framework. This is the share component, and what we're going to talk about today is adaptive communication. So let's get into it. It's September 23rd, 1999. This is NASA's Mission Control Room, which was packed with the brightest engineers and scientists. They'd spent years preparing for this moment. The Mars Climate Orbiter was about to enter Mars's orbit after a 286-day journey through space. At 9:06 a.m., the spacecraft reached Mars, and then silence. The orbiter disappeared. $125 million of technology, countless hours of work, and humanity's chance to study Mars's climate gone. What went wrong? Was it a technical malfunction, design flaw, an attack by Martians? The truth is actually far simpler and far more human. Two teams of scientists were working with different measurement systems. One team based in the US were using the imperial measurement system, and one team based in Europe were using the metric system. Two teams were looking at the exact same numbers and making completely different conclusions. The result? The spacecraft got too close to Mars and disintegrated into its atmosphere. All that money, all that time, all that opportunity gone. We all have different contexts and we all make different assumptions about what people already know. And this can be really dangerous. Today, we're going to explore communicating your ideas and why communicating your ideas is so important. Maybe not with a $125 million spacecraft, but with equally important consequences for our teams, our organizations, and ourselves. And how it's not just about communicating what you think, but about communicating what matters to your audience. To orientate us, so we've been covering this week the Seek, Sense, and Share framework for universal perspective. And today we're going to focus in on the share, which to cover that problem that Jay mentioned, right? Like what the people you were presenting to had a completely different way of looking at networks, and you could have done the best presentation of your life, but it wouldn't have mattered because it didn't address the problem in the way they saw it, like you said. And so, how do you bridge that gap? We again spend many hours doing this with clients. In the next 45 minutes, we're going to cover one of those tools, which I think is the most helpful, and it's called the whole brain thinking model. And I'm going to unpack what that looks like. It is going to help you adjust your communications to influence teams and stakeholders without direct authority, because that's really what we're talking about here. And that can be in a sales conversation, it could be in a performance conversation, it could be cross-functionally. So much of our communication at work is about influencing stakeholders to take actions where we can't just tell them to do that. Welcome, Cami. Also, Shilpa, I saw you joined earlier as well. So good to have you both here. So this is the agenda for today. We're going to talk about thinking preferences and how they shape how we see the world. We're going to then look at what it means to understand your audience and how to adjust your communication. All right, so let's get into it. So in Monday's session in the Seek, we talked about this concept of we all see a partial view of reality, and sometimes we could be looking at the exact same thing, and depending on our perspective, we could be seeing something completely different. Okay, so that's really has hit home to me. This is my wife, Jill. And this idea of how we all think differently has never been more clear in the way we think. So I am, as maybe is not that surprising, a kind of a big picture thinker, optimistic, like always looking at what should we be doing, like what experiences can we have. Um, and and Jill is someone who her default mode is to think she's kind of cautious, conservative. Conservative maybe not the right word. Cautious. She's always looking at what could go wrong, right? And so sometimes that can really it infuriate me. I'm like, let's do this cool thing with the kids, and then she's like, oh, but it's not practical for this and this reason, and I don't often even think about the practical side. So sometimes that can feel like I'm having my ideas kind of stamped on. I don't know if any of you can feel that way with someone in your life. As I said, at times it can result in arguments and it can result in kind of frustration. But the value of the fact that she sees the world differently to me had never been more clear than one day we were at home. I was bathing our our oldest son, and I heard this water going, and so I assumed it was Jill was showering. And I let it go and I let it go. And then I was like, this is not, she normally showers in the morning. This is a weird time to be showering. So I got up and I went to go look into our bathroom. And what I found was that the mains to the water main on the toilet had burst. And so it was just flooding our bathroom with water. We both, she was actually just in the other room putting our daughter down. So we both ran downstairs. We saw literally like a waterfall going through our kitchen, which is below our bedroom, and then into the basement below. So three floors of our house were being flooded. Absolute disaster. Sorry, before I ran down, I tried to close, like to try to switch off that tap for the toilet, but it was jammed, right? So I couldn't stop the water. That was it. That was like my only idea. It was jammed. I couldn't get it to work, and so that was it. I was out of ideas. She knew that we had the water mains to the entire house, exactly where it was in the basement, and immediately she went down there, she turned it off, and we mitigated some of the damage. And and it's embarrassing to admit, but if I was at home by myself, I would not have done this. Like that water would just carried on gushing and made the damage far, far worse. But what had happened, I mean, she had like rehearsed this scenario in her head. She had practiced this already. I hadn't even thought about it. This kind of thing doesn't occur to me. And so it really became clear like how valuable it is to have someone whose brain works like that. And that it's not always her pushing back against my ideas, but she's actually also rehearsing all these worst case scenarios and knows exactly what to do when they happen. And so I share that story to give you this perspective that we do all see the world differently. And if we can understand the way our audience thinks, we can learn to communicate a lot better with them. And so the model that I'm going to offer for this is called the Herman whole brain thinking model. And you can go check this out. They've got like tons of great resources on their website. They also offer training and stuff on this as well. We use it for the purposes of communication, like I'm going to show you. One thing I wanted to just say before we dive into it, and this is true for all the models that we teach, everything you've learned over the last few weeks, all models are wrong, but some are useful. Meaning, no like model can perfectly capture the fluid nature of life and reality, right? This one puts it has four quadrants for how people think, and it's not perfect. No one exists only in one quadrant, right? We all move between them, but it is useful for looking at different ways that information can be understood. All right. So to illustrate the model for you, I'd like to invite you all to a class activity, and you can put this in the chat. You can also just unmute yourself and share. I want to know from you, how do you plan a weekend getaway? What are the first things you think about and do when it comes to planning a weekend getaway? Shilpa, Cami, as our newest attendees, do either of you want to share your perspective on this? Yeah, that's 100%. Jay. Shilpa, Shilpa, I see you came off mute. Okay. How about Cami, can you hear us? All right, Brad.
Yeah,
Okay. Oh,
sorry about
Cami,
that.
cool. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm multitasking. So, um,
So how do
sorry,
you
what
plan
was
a
your?
weekend getaway?
Oh, I like to make a little bullet list of a few things that I want to hit, but I'm not a big like I don't plan out the whole thing. I kind of go with the flow and um just see where it takes me, I guess.
What's like the priority for you to the main thing you focus on? Because I'm kind of with you as well. I kind of don't overthink it. I don't over plan it. What's like the main priority?
I don't know. Okay, so maybe it's because I have young kids right now, but I try not to get too focused on anything because I know that nothing will go the way that I plan it. Just being flexible
Yeah.
and not
Yeah.
getting too stuck on one thing.
Yeah. That's similar to me. I think Jay sounds like yours is similar to that, right? Anything you'd want to add based on your and then Lindsay, I'm going to come to you.
Well, it tails everything that I teach or try to teach salespeople on what to do. So it's completely the opposite, right? There's
Mm,
no
mm,
there's no no pre-planning, there's no, looking around, there's no even the I think, and the worst experience I get, or the common experience, is sometimes I'll get there and realize something happened the day before that I'd reschedule or schedule something over that I might have been more interested in, but because I didn't do that work. So it's still a holiday and it's still a good time, but it could have been better organized if I just known in advance. So
yeah.
I have learned the lesson. I just find it interesting that I have very little discipline where that's concerned, and yet everything about my work is to try and
Mm.
help people establish some discipline. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can relate to that. So it sounds like both you and Cami and myself fit into this experimental thing. So it's more about like and some of it is like done on the fly. If I go, so your Lindsay, your one, you do look ahead, you check the weather, but you also mentioned like you check in on your son, you check in on your husband. I'm curious if do you feel like you're fitting more into again just as a default into the relational side of things here? Like where do you see yourself going towards the most? And then Brad, I'm going to ask you as well.
Oh, I am very, very analytical with everything.
Ah, yeah,
Um, I recently did my disc assessment again, and I am a C through and through. So
okay.
very calculated and yeah, need data and numbers. I kind of from your story from before, I'm very similar to your wife, it sounds like. So
Yeah, yeah,
I plan for the worst for sure.
yeah. Gotta
Yeah.
have that person in your life. It's very
Yeah.
important. Yeah. And Brad, with your one, where do you see yourself defaulting to the most? It sounds like you do a bit of planning ahead of time. You're looking at the maps, all of that.
Yeah, somewhere between, like on the analytical, practical side.
Yeah,
I don't like to get, I like to be flexible, but have a destination in
yeah,
mind and like an ideal route.
yeah.
But sometimes it'll be like, hey, maybe if we go like this road, like I'll be halfway there and be like, hey, this road looks like it might
Right.
be um like a more scenic drive, and so.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally get that. And so there's flexibility built in, but you definitely have some planning ahead of time. And Shilpa, whose mic isn't working, so I first set a goal. Either it's a relaxing getaway, or maybe it's just a new place, catch up on some headspace, or just then I plan accordingly. Mostly adopt the practical. Yeah, okay, a little bit of relational. Okay, so yeah, I think every time I've shown this in the trainings we offer, it's I think everyone can kind of relate to one of these more so than the others, one or two, and then but of course we all kind of do go into all of them, right? So this is the whole brain thinking model, and this example is just one way to illustrate it. Analytical thinkers are very logical, analytical, fact-based, quantitative, right? If you remember from session one, we talked about logical versus narrative. These are the people that are very strong on that logical way of processing information. Practical, this is the what, right? Practical is the how, right? So when you present, like an idea to your boss and they're like, so how are we going to execute this, right? What resources do we need? Like, what's the timeline for it, right? That's the practical. Experimental, very much that I feel in this one is like big picture, holistic, synthesizing lots of things, looking for patterns across things. I don't want a lot of detail. I want big picture first, and then I'll drill down into it. And then relational, and this, yeah, this is the more like people orientated, feelings, kinesthetic and emotional. Like, what is the impact on people? And so again, this isn't you can't like type someone only in one of these things. But we all kind of default to this. And what I'm going to suggest and how we use this model is that if you are communicating something, you need to be able to speak to all four of these. You need to be able to adapt your message to have an analytical component, to have a practical component, to have a relational, and to have an experimental. Okay, and so how you do that? So in the analytical, you want to be clear, precise. You have clear goals and objectives. You have the data, the numbers, all the sort of facts to back things up. Right. On the practical how, it's about plans of action, timelines, instructions, all of the things that you can see here. And if I talk about perspectives a lot, right? And so this is again just different perspectives on the same thing you're trying to communicate. We're going to give you all a chance to practice this in a second. On the relational side is what is the impact on people, right? It's also the style of communication. The relational one is like being open, a little bit more informal, using stories and anecdotes. So this is more on that narrative side that we talked about on Monday. And then experimental, like I said, the big picture frameworks, the long-term strategy, very few details, using metaphors, visuals, also more narrative. It's actually interesting, right? This is like these two are probably more logical. These two are more narrative. We all do all of them. We all have a preference probably for one or two. And if we can adapt our communication to be able to round out our message with all of them, we have a much better job of landing the idea that we're looking to get across. Okay. So now I want to give you all a chance to practice this. Typically with groups, we're going to do a breakout now. So I think what we're going to do, because we've got 5 of you, is to put you into a breakout together for, I don't know, 5 or 10, 5-ish minutes. And I want you to, the interesting part is actually, I think what we might do is do 2 different breakouts. Santi, let's do 2 breakouts. Yeah, and then because I think the interesting part is then coming back and hearing how each group has thought through that and giving you ideas. And this is what we're practicing here now is using the whole brain model to adapt communication. Okay. So the objective of the breakout is for you to make a case for a new tool that will improve your work. And what I'm going to suggest is the case is you're going to basically build a business case for an AI note taker. Okay. And because we only have 2 groups, you're going to practice doing it to all 4 quadrants. So you're going to need to motivate this case to a direct manager who is analytical, a VP of product who is experimental, your head of operations who's very practical, and the head of people who is very relational. Okay. And what you're going to do is we'll break out into those 2 groups is to come up with like how you would communicate to each of these people. And what I want you to think about is what you're going to share, how you're going to share it, and why. Okay, what you're going to share, how you're going to share it, and why. And yeah, so we'll just do like a let's do 5 minutes sort of go through each one and just like how would you change your message for each of them. Then we're going to come back, debrief that, and we can kind of see how each group has thought through this, and hopefully there's some ideas that you guys can take into the work that you're doing right now. Because I think this is, again, just to like emphasize, this is a really practical tool to be able to, whatever you need now to pitch to someone, whether it's a customer, a client, a boss, a colleague, doing it this way helps you build out a more rounded way of explaining that thing. Jay, you have a question.
Yeah, real quick. But I thought you might have answered it. Are we talking about four separate presentations or one presentation that addresses all four in the same audience?
It's a good question. Let's do it as four separate. So let's say like you're going to have a quick conversation with each of those people. What would you say to what, like, given that, again, this is not really true to real life, but for the purpose of practicing, this one person only cares about analytical, and the next person only cares about relational, etc. So how would you tweak your message for all four of them if you were to like pull them aside and sort of you're like getting them on your side for the big pitch at the end of the day? Does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks.
All right. Okay, so let's do that. We'll do a 5 minute breakout just to like get a couple of bullet points for each one, right? So it's just high level practice here, and then the real lesson and learning I think will come when we compare the two responses. All right, Santiago, are we good with the breakouts? All right, let's open the rooms. We'll see you in 6 minutes. Let's debrief. Lindsay actually didn't get a partner, so she has her notes on this, and Jay, Brad, we want to do a comparison now with what you guys came up with. So we're coming up with the plan or a business case for a new AI note taker we want to invest in. Let's start with Jay and Brad. What did you guys come up with for a way to communicate to the analytical person?
I'll let Brad do the details because he had a better handle on it, I think. But I
Oh,
thought what we wanted to do was list the functionalities, the various functionalities of the note taker. So we talk about, its ability to do a full script, a transcript, a summarization, the call to action, the next steps, and we would take and spin a message for each of the four, speaking to each of these features. So we're actually saying we're talking about the same product, but we're going to talk about it a little bit differently to each one of them. So I thought that that was kind of important that we identified what those features were, because then we're going to talk about how we talk to them. And Brad, you want to take that one?
Sure, yeah. I mean, we kind of started on the analytical side, like they're going to be interested in like, like the numbers, the stats, the like what kind of like percentage improvement can we talk about, like accuracy of note taking or like efficiency, and charts, graphs, like numbers, like um very like data driven sort of.
yeah, yeah, that's great. Lindsay, what did you have that was different, or what would you add to that?
Pretty much aligned. I just said for the analytical, how much time and money this tool will save.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. You've compressed it down to the most essential. Okay, so then actually, Lindsay, why don't you do the practical? We'll kind of just bounce back and forth.
Yeah, so for practical, I had thought, just of the individual who likes lists and likes to think about processes and so forth. I would map out the steps out to it would take to incorporate this new tool into existing workflows so that they can really see the practicality of it as it's applied to in day-to-day work.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good. Anything you'd add to that, Brad, Jay?
Yeah, we could have just mentioned like, talk about like implementation plan for how we can kind of onboard um onboard this new product and like what that would look like.
Yeah, this is Lindsay. I'm surprised you didn't come up with this, but this is a good time to do the what could go wrong piece as well, right? So thinking through the risks as well is also sort of a practical approach, right? And maybe a mitigation for each of those as well. Um,
Is that where the change management sits in the practical?
um, I think it's sort of, I think the change management is a broader thing because I could see an experimental part to that as well. Like, why are we making this change, right? Um, but yeah, the practical part of change management, I almost think like all of this is change management, right? The investment in a new tool is the change, and and there's different ways to make that case. Um,
I think I meant was the practical person more interested in
oh,
how that change was going to be managed.
I'm with you.
Uh,
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I would think so. Yeah,
all right.
yeah, which is definitely the risk part as well, right? Yeah. Okay, so on this side we had the like costs, benefits. Here it's implementation. I'm just doing this at a very high level, but implementation, risk mitigation. All right, let's hear Jay and Brad. What did you guys say for experimental?
Not, we didn't get that far much, but the only thing that came to mind was that that's the risk taker. They're the ones who are want to lean in to the change
Yeah.
and try something different, moving from paper to electronic, and more about the speeds and feeds of the tool than about anything else.
Mm. What do you mean by the speeds and feeds of the tool?
Why electronic automated note taking is better than sitting in a meeting and handwriting it down, or even having a one person doing an audio recording and then finding a way to share it because now it's integrated with the meeting and nobody's distracted, or doesn't cost an additional resource if you have to have like an admin
Mm.
do it for you, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So
It's a good example of downstream implications as well. It's definitely the bigger picture stuff. Yeah. Lindsay, anything you'd add to that one?
Um, my understanding of the experimental is that they like to, you know, kind of explore and maybe have hands-on or kind of, yeah, just experience it, not to sound
Yeah.
as literal. So I said that I would either try to mock up a prototype or get a like a test site or something, test example of the tool
Or like a
itself for
demo.
users to
Yeah.
experience, yeah, how it will actually work.
Yeah. That's a great suggestion.
are the
That's
experimental people likely to be your like your beta group or your test group? Is that
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a high likelihood. Yeah. As
so
someone
you
who's looking to try new things. Yeah.
so you would also position this as, you're going to be the ones to lead the charge sort of thing, and we're going to
Mm.
be relying on
Champions.
we're going to be relying on your feedback as we
Yeah.
roll out the implementation, that sort of thing.
Yeah. 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 That's a really good point. Yeah, you see how, so I should have started doing this from the beginning, actually, the writing it, but you see how, like, again, it's the same message, but just framed differently. Let's complete the picture and then be able to look at it holistically. So, Jay, Brad, what did you guys come up for? Maybe you didn't have a chance yet, but just top of your head for relational.
I was just thinking we'd want to focus more on the interpersonal aspects and like how this tool will allow for um, people to focus more on the conversations and
Mm,
and less on the like trying to um, like multitask, having to like write and kind of keep up with the conversation like with notes instead of thinking and
mm,
discussing.
yeah, yeah, that's a really good one. Because, I mean, that's like, it, if you another way to look at this is like if you focused on that for someone who was looking for analytical, they'd be like, why are you telling me this? Like I'm not interested in that, right? I want to see how much is it going to cost? Like what ROI we're going to get, that kind of thing. For a relational thinker, what you suggested is great. That's really on point.
And we see and I saw this in Teams because if you have a Teams meeting and then you're using Teams chat, you can take the transcript or the audio and it goes right into the chat. So now it's all socialized. So I would think that
Mm.
the relational person is saying, "Oh, we're going to have tighter team working because everybody's seeing the same information in the same central repository."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Again, impact on the people part, really focusing in on that. That was good. Yeah, Lindsay, anything you'd add?
I said that I would actually switch from like presenting information to these types of people and lean more heavily into like facilitating questions. So
Oh,
I
I
would
like it.
ask them questions to understand how it would improve their efficiency, how it would impact their work. So make it more of a discussion and seek to understand how they have internalized this from their own kind of perspective.
That's awesome. Hey, guys, like that, I think that's such a great way of that's the how, right? And that is as important. And what I mean, the how, like how you would present to someone like this. And yeah, the very, very effective way to bring them into the conversation. Yeah, I love that. All right, and just have a look at that now. So the same message said in multiple different ways to different audiences. Okay. First point I wanted to make, and for of kind of the main takeaways I want you to leave this session with is this type of this work that we just did now. This is invaluable prep work for any time you have to present or communicate something, even like writing an important email or a memo or obviously preparing for a presentation is to think about your message from these four different quadrants. So you go through this, even if you're not going to have to cover one of those, right? It is rounding out your thinking. So if you remember when we talked about in session two, in the sense session, we looked at how to take information and develop insights and eventually a main insight. What you've learned today is how to flesh out that main insight from four different perspectives. And that's an incredibly powerful tool for adapting your communication to your audience. Because what you are able to do with this now is create perspective hooks for people to come into the conversation, right? Someone who is an experimental thinker has like a frame of reference now to like be interested in what you're presenting. And as we talked about right at the beginning, they may be also interested in the data as well, right? Tell me, okay, cool. I'm like, I get the big picture now. Tell me what the ROI is, right? How much is this going to cost? But of course, you've done that work already. You can go there if you need to. All right, so that's where the benefit of this really, really comes in.
That
Does
goes back
anybody?
to
Yeah, go.
my original question of, I mean, honestly, you rarely have the luxury of being able to isolate each of these four audience
Exactly.
types. So if you have a mixed audience, you does the message always incorporate all four types of messaging?
Yeah, I think that is where you have to be able to be flexible to know. So you've got to, so I would say yes, you should always do this, right? You should always look at it from these four perspectives so that you can build out your main insight like that. Then when you're communicating, we don't have time for it today, but another aspect of this share module is this idea of perspective hooks. And so how do you compress the message? Like say, let's just pick one of these, right? So how do you compress the big picture why, the downstream implications, maybe this concept of champions and that into one like concise, it's probably two sentences, right? So one concise paragraph of two sentences. So we have a thing on that called perspective hooks. There's like a framework for that. And so once you've got like four of these perspective hooks, there isn't really a better answer to this than you've got to test it out. You've got to like put them out there. If one doesn't resonate, go to the next one quickly. That is what communication is putting it out there and seeing what the feedback is. And if you don't get the feedback you're looking for, try something different, right? Communication is our responsibility. If people are not hearing us, it's our responsibility. It's not them, right? Even if they're distracted, it's us. It's on us to get that attention, right? So that's where perspective hooks can really play a big role. Any other questions or comments, Jay? That was really, really helpful. Every question, comment you guys have, like, really helps round out what we're talking about today.
There's more to this. Well, like I said, even my original example, it was a cultural issue more than anything. I don't even think you could distill it down to these four categories. So I'm curious where, I mean, does that just mean there's more different ways that different kinds of audiences that you're having to address that you're not even aware of?
Yeah, I mean, can you give me an example? Like, are you saying that it's you had in a case where the way you needed to communicate didn't fit into one of these four?
Yeah,
Or
it was they, like I said, they approach the problem so completely differently. It's almost the challenge of second language. I'll give you another example. I'll try to be
mm,
brief. I spent 5 years in Europe. One of my main tasks was when a customer was in flames after spending weeks trying to troubleshoot through my TAC in Holland. So they were all native Dutch speakers. I go to somewhere um, uh, uh, in the Middle East or even in just a Southern European country, um, and they have their native language, but they're communicating both sides in English, neither of which is native. So they're literally talking past each other because culturally they're using English to speak Dutch and English to speak, Spanish
mm,
kind of thing.
yeah.
My job was to go and literally listen to the customer in English, translate that problem into English that I knew my Dutch TAC would understand, get the solution, and then translate it back to the
Mm,
customer. I look like a hero and I did no work. You know what I said? It was just a matter of the language barriers.
yeah.
Uh, so this is fascinating stuff. I'm just trying to
Mm,
how do you anticipate that kind of a problem, or is that just such a corner case that you can't?
yeah.
You
Yeah.
just
I
do
feel
it.
like I feel like it's a higher grade problem in that you got that communication piece. So you literally are dealing with communication loss or information loss that's happening, right? Because of the need to change the language, there's going to be some meaning, some fidelity that falls away, and so it does feel like a bit of an edge case. Um, I think to help, I mean, the way I think, and maybe you did this because you seem to be successful at that, is this could help you build empathy with that person. So when you are trying to like go to your Dutch engineer, is like you communicating in a way that they think, right? And like this is what I need from you. This is what the customer's asking for. Like you're using some elements of this to get that message across, but you are the one that's having to like transport it across all these different languages. I think that's a whole nother ball game to do. How do you do that without losing the meaning?
Because I think that this becomes a massive challenge for L&D, for enablement, when you move multinational, when you go into other
Yeah.
geos. And because one of the general rules of thumb is I can't in California build an enablement program that works in Germany from 50,000 feet to zero. I
Mm,
go from 50,000 feet to 10,000 feet and I let them fill in the 10,000 to zero,
mm,
right? Which is more than localization. It's the cultural stuff, right? The stuff I
right.
simply don't understand.
Right.
So I like this model. I'm just trying to apply it,
Yeah.
to these real world problems I've had.
What I would recommend you look into is something called culture mapping. I haven't gone into deep myself, but I do, and what you're talking about is it is like it's a different layer of this, right? It's a good point you're making, because this is helpful for English to English, but what you're talking about is like a whole nother layer. And I know everyone keeps raving about this. I think there's a book called Culture Mapping. There's, I think, a woman who wrote that and teaches it. And so, yeah, I definitely would recommend you get on that path.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So then to wrap it up, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. I think we all see this all the time, right? Like we think we've communicated something, and then the other person has just heard it in a totally different way, right? And we have so much communication breakdown because of that. So to recap what we've just covered today in this session, we all process information differently, and that we think through insights from multiple preferences. We all have a default to one of these, but we can cross many of them. And if we can learn to tailor our message to how our audience thinks, and and we also covered today, we don't even have to know exactly which way our audience prefers. But if we've done the prep work to look at it from all four angles, we have enough to go from to put it out there and get feedback and see what is resonating. And once you find the one that resonates, to then go deep into your insights. Because it ain't what you say, it's what they hear that matters. All right. Well, thank you all very much for being with me this week. This was a ton of fun. I hope you got value out of it. And would love to hear from you as well, if you would be willing, and we can send this out as an email afterwards, your thoughts on how the session went. If you'd be willing to share a testimonial, even better. This is the first time we've done this live for the general public. And so yeah, we want to keep doing this. We want to keep getting the word out there. So if you think this was helpful and you want to share it with others, we'd love to have you help us do that.